Hi, you guys. Welcome to another episode of Social Emotional Workshop. We are here with Joe and Theresa from Care of Southeastern Michigan, and we're going to be talking about creating boundaries today. Joe, Theresa, we're so glad to have you back. Welcome.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Tony.
Okay, well, ladies, since there's only two of you, if you feel like asking questions or have comments, feel free to speak up. I don't mind, being interrupted. It's fine with me. I'd rather hear from you. Or I guess if you just raise your hand, she can unmute you. Do they have that ability, Tony, to do it on their own?
No,
Okay.
they can raise their hand and I will unmute them.
Okay. All right.
And I'll keep an eye on the chat.
That's good. Okay. So we're going to talk about boundaries, which makes everybody seem like the bad guy. Because there was one time when I started teaching classes, parenting classes, like 29 years ago. And most of the time we were dealing with parents that were so harsh in their discipline. And now it seems like it is leaning more towards more of a permissive parents. That seems to be the issue that comes up more often than not. And I think it's because both parents are working, they have activities that they do, their kids do. And so time's at a premium with their kids, and they don't want to be the one that has to bark out orders or create these boundaries and then possibly get into conflicts with their kids. And so they tend to be a little bit lax. So not every parent every time, should say that, but that's why we just need to talk about creating boundaries, why it's important and how to do it, and what age we should start doing that type of thing. So without boundaries, obviously kids are going to have a lack of sense of who they are, what's important to them and what's not important to them, and how they want to be treated by other people and how they should treat other people. We don't want them to become one of those, self-centered kids that just feels that they can do whatever they want to whomever they want, because there's never any consequence to their actions. So people aren't here just to meet their needs. Everybody else has their own boundaries also. And kids who, they act like they don't want to have boundaries, but if kids don't have someone that they feel is in control of what is happening around them, then they tend to act out more because it's scary for them. They don't like that feeling, even though they say they do. I remember when my kids were teenagers, and there was a boy that my son hung out with, and he was being raised by his grandmother, who at the time was probably in her 50s, and she was tired, and she'd already raised her kids, and now she was raising this boy. And when all of his little friends would come over our house, they had to go through my questions. Where are you going? Who are you going with? Is anyone going to be there at that house? Call me if you leave. The whole rigmarole, and Luke's got to be the cool guy, at 13, like his mom asking him all those questions. And he was rolling his eyebrow and his, eyes, and he was huffing and puffing and, geez, don't you trust me? And I said, of course I trust you. I trust other people. So I just want to know where you're going, what's happening. And as they were walking out the door, I heard this boy that's being raised by his grandma. I heard him say to Luke, kind of under his breath, but loud enough that I could hear it. He said, at least somebody cares where you're going, what you're doing. So I know it's a sense of comfort for kids when they have those boundaries and they're able to understand the world around them using them. And I like this. I don't know if you can see this. I'm just going to go ahead and read it. It's by Nicole Holtzluver, and it says, I use the metaphor of driving over a bridge. If there are no guardrails, you're going to drive pretty slowly. And not only are you not really going to pay attention to the beauty of the world around you, you're going to be focused on getting across the bridge safely, not going over the edge, which has no limits for you. And that makes sense why kids need boundaries. And that makes sense to me why they would feel so uncomfortable. And that's why it makes sense to me that they would lash out, hoping that one of their parents would get angry enough to set some boundaries, or they'll set them themselves, but not knowing how to do it correctly or what's even important. It just makes everything worse. So, nobody wants to be the bad guy, but this is very important for kids to understand what boundaries are. So, what are some reasons why we don't set them, why we don't get these boundaries set up, or why we let them get violated really easily? And there's some reasons, a lot of kids want to be liked by their kids. Like I said, they're working all day. And if they come home, they've got tons of things that they have to do. Their kids might need some running around with their activities. They might be part of the sandwich generation, taking care of their parents and their kids. And just so much is going on that, they don't want to be the one that has to start this conflict where they have to say no. And then the kid is going to argue with you. So also the need to always rescue someone, which is like codependency, making sure that, you don't want to be the enabler, saving them from consequences all the time. If they don't see what the consequences of their actions are at home where it's safe, they're never going to understand what those boundaries are later in their life. And so they, even if it hurts sometimes, there's that tough love part of it. We have to keep, what do you call that word? We have to keep consistent with our boundaries. And all through their growing up, they don't have to be rescued. They need to understand how their behavior affects other people, what might happen if they don't keep those boundaries. Another bullet might be allowing your kids to decide what you think about things. So you're never really sure about what you're doing, or you make a boundary and then your kids talk you out of it. And so now you're trying to think, well, is that something I really care about? Or could it have been more flexible at the time? I wish I'd thought about it better. I just said a blanket no without really thinking about it or getting any input from my kids. So now I don't know how I feel about that. Should I trust my kids and let them go to the party? Or, it's all a big mash up in your head. You don't really know what you think about it. And maybe along with that, you might not know how to articulate what you think about certain issues. So you might say, no, you can't go to that party. But you don't know how to tell your kids that. You don't know how to explain to them. I mean, like I said, I just said, yeah, I trust you. I don't trust other people. But that's not always comfortable for everyone. So, you might have a hard time explaining that. So I know there's so many temptations out there you guys are going to be up against. And I don't know how to talk to you about this. It's uncomfortable for me not to even broach the subject about sex and drugs. So you have a hard time telling them why you're setting up this boundary. Another reason might be that you are making your kids the center of your life, which is not healthy because that's going to interfere with your other friendships, like your partner or your friends or your siblings. And then you don't have a life, and so your whole life revolves around these kids, which is not healthy for you, and it's also not healthy for them. They need to see that their parents are good at setting boundaries, because that's one of the ways that kids learn about it, by watching what you do. So in order to create boundaries, we have to think about what's important to us. Remember I said sometimes we think, that we break a boundary because we don't know how to articulate it or how we feel about it. So, don't create a boundary just because your mom did or your, one of your siblings. It has to be important to you. In order for it to be important to you, you have to know why you're creating this boundary. A lot of people wouldn't allow their kids to go to a party at all if they were teenagers. And I knew that was impossible. I knew that a lot of people did that, but I wasn't willing to do that because I knew I couldn't stick to it. I knew that my kids would go anyway. So I tried to work within the boundary that I created, which was you're not allowed to drink under the age of 21 or use drugs under the age of 21 or use illegal drugs at all. So in order to help them create that boundary, I would go over, role play. What if you're in a situation at a party, you don't know how to get out of it? What are you going to do? If somebody offers you a joint, what are you going to do? If you're alone with some person who could be a potential sexual partner and you don't know what you're going to do, what are you going to do? So I gave them some tools to work within my boundary, which was, to me, was more important, of not using drugs or having sex too early or engaging in unhealthy activities. So a lot of discussion has to go on there. But I didn't want to stick to other people's boundaries. I wanted my own. And then this one I kind of mentioned, so that you don't become flip-floppy about stuff. What are your non-negotiable boundaries? Mine was about drugs and having sex too early because I had addiction in my family and I knew how young it could start. That was most important to me. Second most important thing was to give them tools to use. So skills, tools will help them keep that boundary. And so that was non-negotiable for me. Homework, it was important that they get it done, yes. But that one was a little bit more flexible because it really wasn't my problem. It's their problem, unless they don't know what they're doing. So is curfew, is that negotiable or non-negotiable? It might work better if your kids have some input, if you have discussion. So if you're more flexible on some things and more inflexible on things that are really important to you, they start to understand what's important because you are not making everything, an over-the-top boundary that they can't possibly stay within. So try to be flexible as you can on really important issues. Those should be the ones where they're non-negotiable. So I want to ask you guys, you're probably going to have to put an answer in the chat or raise your hand, but how many faces do you see on this picture?
Interesting.
Just put a number into the box, raise your hand and shout it out. Nobody's got a guess?
One, but they're still trying. Laugh out loud.
Okay.
I saw this before and it took me a long time to find some more faces.
Yeah, some faces are more obvious than others are.
Nope, just one so far.
Okay.
I see three.
Okay, well, that's good because there's actually four. The pretty obvious one is Mr. Lincoln, but the other three are a little bit harder to see. And I could see it really clearly, but the people I'm talking to couldn't see it really clearly. So that's kind of the point, we need to have these discussions about boundaries with our kids because it's really obvious to us. We know the dangers. We know what's out there, but they don't always see it. And even if they see it, they don't understand it. Oh, come on. That's never going to happen to me. Mom, be real. I'm not going to do that. My daughter used to say that when she was young, I'm not going to have sex too early because I've got goals. She was really young at the time, like 13. I said, we don't have a boyfriend right now. It's going to happen when you do have a boyfriend, you know, and, you know, you're in a situation that you can't even contemplate right now. You know, then what are you going to do? It's not going to be so easy for you to say, no, I'm not going to do that. So we got to talk about this so that you can get your boundaries straight. So it's important, you know, to explain calmly. Might have to have a conversation that you're not ready for, but hopefully you've been having that conversation anyway. And if not, then now is a good time to talk. And a lot of times when you're talking about touchy subjects like this, you might get angry because they don't see it the same way you do. They don't see those faces in there. But just try to be calm and explain what you think might be going on, or what could happen, I should say. And if anybody starts to get angry during this process, then just stop. You know, stop right now, and then you can pick it up later. Because once everybody's head explodes, it's hard to pick up those pieces and start over again. So try to explain calmly, and then get their input a little bit. You know, ask them, like when you're talking about curfew, ask them what they think is reasonable for somebody their age to come in on a school night or on a weekend night during school. You know, and you don't have to accept what they say. You're just getting them to have some say in the process. And then you can negotiate from there, because it's only fair, you know, especially if those kids who have earned your trust at this point, you know, maybe it is okay to give them a little bit more time than you're planning on, but you won't know that unless you sit down and talk about it together. Maybe you can make your curfew flexible on weekends rather than on weekdays. That has to be a little bit more stricter. Also, be consistent. As I mentioned before, you know, you don't want to be changing your mind all the time. So even when it's difficult and they're whining and trying to tell you, you know, I'll do different, you know, it won't mess up. No, I'm sorry, this is my boundary right here. And this is what we have to follow through with. And get the buy-in, which the buy-in is not their approval. The buy-in is part of that input. You know, get them to have some say in it. Use negotiation, because that's another skill that you want them to learn. You don't want them going into, one of the keynote speakers at our conference said this one time, you don't want them going into a bank and demanding a certain rate or whining because they have a variable instead of a, you know,
Fixed rate.
Can't think of it. Huh?
Fixed rate.
Fixed rate. So they need to see how negotiation works. They need to say that they don't always get their way, but they do have some say. And they need to see that they might be able to influence a boundary. And that's what the buy-in is all about. And also, we have to go over it with them. You know, I could go over the boundary with my daughter pretty easily. She would accept it. But my son was a harder nut to crack. So I had to sit down and talk to him about boundaries that I created. And it reminds me of when he started driving. You know, we gave him some boundaries to follow, and we got his input. And we also set up some consequences that were different for every boundary. You know, if this happens, it'll be this. Like if you have more than one person in your car, which the boundary was you can only have one person. So if I find out you had more, then this will be the consequence. You know, you might lose the car for the weekend. If your grades are falling, then you might lose the car or the privilege of the car until your grades come back up. You know, or if you're caught smoking or drinking and driving or using any kind of drug that might influence you, then you won't get the car back to the privilege till you're 21. So, you know, we try to keep the consequence appropriate for what the boundary was that they were breaking. And then we went over it, he and I and his dad. And I asked him what it meant to him so that he could explain it back to me, what he thought he heard. what he thinks it means. And then we signed it, he signed it, I laminated it and put it on the refrigerator. Then I don't have to talk about it at all. If something happens, I go get it and I give it to him because he signed it, he dated it, and he explained it, that he knew what it meant. So I don't have to really do anything. Kind of took care of itself. Not that he broke any, he never ended up breaking any, but I wasn't going to take any chances, especially in high school. So we can start setting boundaries with toddlers. So expect some pushback because their brain development's still going on and they're in their emotional brain. So realizing that they're in their emotional brain, it helps with the frustration that you're going to have when they get angry and start saying no. So they're going to say no a lot. But just to be really clear and concise, short and sweet with toddlers. Don't throw your toy. You might even tell them, I'm worried when I see you throw a toy, somebody could get hurt. Don't throw your toy. Check if they understand. So do you know what I mean? What don't I want you to do? And then lay down the limit. If you do throw your toy, then I'll have to put it away until later on today. And you have to make sure that you follow through. If the child decides to go through with the unwanted action, then you have to go through with the consequence. Just make sure it's related to what they're doing. Just like I did with that driving contract, oh, come on, Mama, I'll get those grades up. It's only one grade. No, I'm sorry. Our consequence was until, that grade comes up when I see it with my little beady eyes, then, you'll get the car back. Because once you open up that breach of that contract, it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So, or not the contract, but the boundary, it's just going to get bigger and bigger. So, follow through. If you've done your work, you got their buy-in, and you got them to understand it, there's no reason to give them a second chance. Say it once, because once means that you mean what you say what you mean. Are they going to get mad? Yeah, they are, but you don't have to go to that party. They'll get over it. They'll feel better in a couple of hours or the next day, especially when you're dealing with teenagers. Being upset about not being able to do something is a fact of life. Not getting what you want is a fact of life. So, you don't have to go there and engage in that activity with them. I'm sorry you feel that way, and walk away. That's it. Sorry that you're bummed that you can't go to that party. What else could you do tonight that's just as fun? I don't know. I don't want to do anything else. I don't want to go to that party. Okay, well, have fun tonight at home, and talk about this another time. As soon as you feel angry, stop talking about it. You don't need to fight. You just need to keep your boundaries firm. Another way that we can help keep kids, within their boundaries and help them understand what it means is to raise assertive kids. And I don't believe that people really know what assertive means. I think most people think that assertive means that you yell at people and scream at them, call them names. That's aggressive. So they need to understand that assertiveness is standing up for yourself and respecting yourself, as well as respecting other people. And so, they have to think about how they want to approach somebody, and they have to be more assertive. They have to know those difference between those, what passive is, what aggressive is, and what assertive is. If they don't see you doing it, then it's not going to stick, as well as if they see how to be assertive with other people. So they have the right to say no, whether it's an unwanted hug or a bossy friend on the playground, or somebody that wants them to do something and they don't feel comfortable. They have to be able to say no. It's their right. And it's the beginning of teaching kids about consent. I had a friend I used to work with, and for her senior prom, there was a guy in her class that asked her and she did not want to go with him. And she said no. And this guy was a friend of their families. So the parents must have told her parents, because they talked her into going. And she said, I don't want to go with him. But, they wanted to make this boy happy, I guess. And they thought it would be sweet if she went with this friend. And probably her parents didn't want to deal with the other parents. So, she was kind of forced into going to her senior prom with somebody that she didn't want to go with, and that's not really fair. And it's not teaching her about consent either. That when she says no, she means no. That's in every area of your life, not just sexual consent, but every area, that I have a right to say no. So let me ask you this, you guys, what messages did you get about that? Like I was telling you about my friend, she's 50 something years old. What messages do you get when you were growing up, and how did that affect you now? What challenges do you face now? I'll let you think about that for a minute or two, so I can tell you another story about my daughter. When she was 4, that's her when she was 4 right there. She went through a phase where, she didn't want to be kissed and touched a lot. I don't know why. Probably because she was 4 years old and she was just starting to see what her power was all about, maybe. I don't know, learning how to make friends. She wanted to maybe challenge herself, whatever. Maybe just because she's a knucklehead at 4 years old. But we went over to my parents, and of course, they have to kiss you when you come in. They have to touch you while you're there. They have to make you eat, and then they've got to kiss you before you walk out the door. Well, she wasn't having it. She wouldn't kiss anybody. And my parents were just so brokenhearted. And I said, you guys, it's just a phase. If we make a big deal about it now, it's always going to be a big deal. But if you just ignore it and, let her go, she'll be back the next week and it'll be gone. It's just something she's trying on for size. But it's important for her to have, autonomy over her own body. So if she doesn't want to kiss you and hug you, just let it go. And sure enough, it did. It went away the next week. We went over there and she ran in the house and kissed them both. Luckily they didn't bring up the past or try to get silly or sarcastic with her. They just kissed her. So did someone have something they wanted to share?
Not in the chat yet, but I wrote, I was told, be nice, don't make someone feel bad. So you're going to comply because you don't want to, hurt their feelings, even though you don't want to do it. That's a message from my past.
Yeah. And I'm surprised that as the male that you got that message. Usually it's females that are told that, don't stir the pot, don't make people angry, don't say no, if you can do it for them, put yourself out a little, then don't say no. You should make everybody happy. Not every female gets that message, but a lot of us do. So my story was pretty long. I'm surprised that, somebody did say something. Never say yes when things are offered to you. Okay, that's the message you got now. Oh, you always have to say no when people offer you drinks or food, Jamie? Is that it?
Yeah, she says. I kind of get that message too, it's like being kind. Even though you're hungry, they offer you something, but I can't put them out. So I have to say no, thank you. But I really, it's like being kind of when you're visiting, you don't want to be a nuisance or put them out in any way.
I see. Yeah. Yeah.
I wish I had a drink of water. Somebody offered me, can I get you something to drink? No, I'm fine.
Yeah. When you're not really, because you're so thirsty.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you still feel that way, Jamie, when you go over somebody's house? You still get that feeling like I shouldn't bother anybody.
We'll wait till Jamie's reply, but it took me a long time to get out of that kind of I'm lesser, not really I'm lesser, but I don't want to put any inconvenience of somebody. Took a long time for me to shake that. Jamie says, I have outgrown it.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people don't, though. It kind of gets ingrained in their head. My mom was a people pleaser. She would never say no. Just the opposite of that. And I found myself getting into that, because you don't want to upset anybody. You should always say yes whenever somebody needs help. And when I first started going back to work after my kids, when my kids were 10 and 8, I got a part-time job at CARE. And things started piling up. I was doing a lot of stuff at my church. I was like teaching catechism. I was a Eucharistic minister. I was part of some kind of mom's group. I was doing a lot of stuff there. And then I started this job. And one night, I think I may have told you guys this before. One night, my priest called and wanted me to do one more thing. And I said, I just can't do it. Because I knew that I was already stressed out by him calling me and asking me. And I knew that if I picked up this one more thing, that I was going to regret it. And it looks like somebody said something. What did they say, Joe?
She said, yes, Theresa, I'm 100% guilty of this. I've just recently, this year, started being okay with saying no.
Okay. So I told him no. I said, I'm sorry, can't do that. I just started back to work. And he said, well, let me get this straight. Are you saying no to me? Yeah, I believe that's what I just said. And he wouldn't talk to me anymore. Gave me the cold shoulder. So, that's a lot when you grow up, 8 years of Catholic school. Geez, I made the priest mad, But part of me just had to let it go. Yeah, I wasn't comfortable. It was awkward, but I just had to let it go because I knew if I did that, I was going to be, it's going to be a difficult thing for me to do. So I learned it kind of late too. That was like 22 years ago. I was in my 40s. I was 45. So,
Theresa.
Yeah, I had what?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, finish your story. I didn't know you had something going.
No, I was just going to say, it came to me late to start saying no. But once I did, I was so glad that I did because I didn't want that extra burden. What were you going to say, Joe?
I like the story that you told of Leah being bossed around by Luke and how Leah stood up for herself. And you didn't tell her. You just said, if you want to share that story really quick.
Yeah. He was, they were young. They were like 5 and 7 probably. And he was bossing her around all the time. And she would come crying to me. That's all I did was try to boss her around. So I said, well, what could you do? Is he your dad? No. Well, then you don't have to listen to him. What could you do when he does that? We went through a whole scenario. If she gets mad at him, what could she do? And she wouldn't do it. She kept coming back and whining at me. So I just stopped listening to her. I just said, yeah, I'm sorry you're sad, because she'd always, turn on the waterworks. This is becoming an attention thing, I think. So I just said, you know what to do. If it bothers you, I'm sure you'll fix it or something like that. I just ignored her. And then I heard her go out there and say to him, shut up, Luke, you're not the boss of me. And so finally she got a backbone. I was so happy to hear her say that to him because she needed to stand up to her brother so that she could do that, practice it that way and go out in the world and stand up to other guys, in school or where she works. That was just the beginning of her learning to have her own voice. And so that was a good way for her to understand boundaries too. I needed to let her have that. Because that's what we agreed on, that she was going to go and say, leave me alone. I don't have to do what you say, or something like that. So, I started them young, trying to get them to find their voice. I mean, I helped her a little in the beginning, but I wasn't willing to solve this for her. It's not my problem. He wasn't hitting her. And she knew how to take care of it because we talked about it. So now it has to sit in her lap. And she has to learn to use that muscle and say, shut up and leave me alone, or she'll never do it, you know. So this kind of stretches into those body safety rules when they're really young, when they're around that same age, like 4 or 5 years old. You know, they have to understand that their body belongs to them. And that's why I thought it was important that Leah not kiss or hug her grandparents that day. Start small like that. But that message stays in their head. It made me uncomfortable to have to kiss my grandparents, but, you know, I had to do it to make them happy. I don't want that message in there about their bodies, you know, and they should also have a safety network. There should be some people, at least 5 people that they can talk to, that if they tell them something important, they'll be believed. You know, if I'm not available, if they're feeling worried or scared, I can tell somebody in my safety network that I feel this way, and they promise to believe me. And then that's going to lead also to that discussion about, you know, private parts. You know, we in the Paper People program, which is, you know, drug prevention, but it's also about teaching kids how to keep themselves safe and ask for help when they need it and problem solve. You know, we talk about your private parts are covered by your bathing suit. So that makes sense to them. You know, nobody should be touching any of those parts that are covered by your bathing suit. You guys have probably heard that already. And we also have to talk to them about secrets. You know, what are safe, okay secrets to keep? Like, don't tell mom we're planning a surprise for her. Or don't tell dad we're going to go on this great trip, or don't tell grandma we're going to come visit her for her birthday. But secrets that make you feel uncomfortable, you know, secrets that make you feel scared, those are secrets that you don't keep. Those are secrets that you tell. And then if you're going to tell them that, they also have to understand what their body feels like when they're asked to do something or keep a secret that they don't like. You know, that feeling in your stomach that makes you think, this is not safe for me, this is not good for me. Or you might start sweating, or you might start to shiver, or you might start to clench your jaw. You know, they need to have discussions about feelings a lot. That's why Joe and I always talk about reflective listening, I messages, because that gets kids used to that idea of talking about how they feel. When they were little, we don't have any sidewalks in our neighborhood. We went for walks every day. And as my son got older, I would say to him, tell me when you think it's safe to cross the street. You know, but if it feels safe, if a car looks like it's kind of far away, but it makes your tummy feel weird to think about running across the street, tell me that. And pay attention to that, because that's a sign that something is not safe for you. So we practiced a lot. You know, our boundary, our rule was that you don't cross the street without holding hands. So I didn't think he was going to run across the street. He knew that all I was looking for was the signal. Is it okay to cross? Is it not okay to cross? And then we could talk about it. And we could talk about, you know, how their body felt too when they were scared. So those things are important discussions that we have with kids all the time. That way they know what an unsafe secret is. That way they know when to go talk to their safety network, you know, their parents, their teacher, their grandparents, whoever feels safe to them. And then I brought, you know, I made this PowerPoint for some young moms at this pregnancy center where they go and live until they have their baby. And so a lot of times they will ask me how to have conversations with their kids. And I always say, you know what, go get a book, a kid's book at the library. You don't have to buy it. You know, just go there. When my kids were little, the big thing for them was that the Berenstain Bears, they always explained everything so nicely using metaphors. You know, a stranger can look like a beautiful apple. That's one thing I remember from Berenstain Bears. He had this big red, beautiful apple. Doesn't this apple look nice on the inside or on the outside? Then when he cut it in half, there was a worm in there and it was kind of rotted. So, you know, the dad bear put the apple together again and talked about how nice it looked on the inside. And you can't tell by looking at it that there's a worm on the inside. So I was explaining that to them, and I talk about there's, ask the librarian, what's a good book about teaching kids about consent, about people not touching their body? What would be a good book for that? And what I found was this one. This is Miles is the Boss of His Body. And obviously it's for really young kids. And it's just this kid, Miles, whose birthday it is. And so like his grandfather grabs him and hugs him really tight. His brother messes up his hair. His dad tickles him, and he's, for whatever reason, doesn't want to be touched. And he doesn't like all this touching without asking. It's starting to bother him. So when the celebration comes and they bring the cake out, he's supposed to blow the candles out, he kind of has a little boy moment, and he runs in his room crying, and his mom goes in there and they talk. And so she helps him to be assertive and state what his boundaries are. So that's kind of nice. Kids reading books like that with their parent helps them to understand. Model it yourself. I talked about that. Speak up when you need to, like I did to that priest, and say no. You guys are probably good at it. My generation wasn't the best. I had forced myself to do it. But what our kids need to learn is talk about the times when you did it and it was really hard for you and how you overcame it. Because I've told my kids, when you have to stand up for yourself, when you have to have an unpleasant conversation, when you have to say no to somebody, it's going to be uncomfortable. That never goes away. It never does. You don't just all of a sudden decide that it's real easy for you. It can be very awkward and very uncomfortable. But you have to do it anyway. So the more you do it, it'll become a little bit easier for you, but it's never just totally comfortable, especially if it's somebody who you feel might be really important, like a boss or a partner or a best friend or a sibling. Those might be harder because you have time invested in those relationships and you don't want to upset those people. But, I tell my kids, you have, in order to keep your sense of self-worth, you have to believe that you're just as important as they are. And if it's not comfortable, doesn't make you feel good to do it, then don't do it. Even if somebody's going to be sad or let down. You don't have to explain yourself. We're going to see a video about that. You don't have to explain. What you're going to hear in that video is that sometimes no is just a one-word sentence. No, sorry, I can't do that, or just no, period. So, and then claim the times when you did it well. What did that feel like after you did it? I wasn't happy after I told Father Ron no, because I knew that I upset him, and I could especially feel that he wasn't happy with me. But afterwards, like I said before, I was always so grateful that I set up my boundaries and said no. I couldn't have handled one more thing. And so also, I feel like I skipped. No, I didn't. Okay. So don't kneecap your sentences. And again, this is something that women do all the time. We use words like just, I'm just trying to help. I just want to say this one thing. Maybe you should leave. Maybe, could you maybe get up and let me have that chair? It's so uncomfortable. And then sort of, take those out. You don't have to say those. You could see the example there. Maybe you should just leave. No, maybe. You should leave. Sweet, short, and to the point. So that shows me that, you mean what you say and you say what you mean. I'm trying to help. These are modifiers and they try to soften things. But you know what? When you're assertive, when girls or women are assertive, they're not going to be liked all the time. That's okay. You don't have to have everybody like you, because then you're miserable. And so that was another thing that I tried to talk to my daughter about is not so much my son. Boys don't ever seem to have that problem. I'm not going to put all boys in that category, but my son didn't seem to have a problem with it, saying no. But I know that she did. I know that there was a time in her life when she was a people pleaser. So we talked about what your voice sounds like. If it's real breathy and talking a lot, and it sounds like you're not using your lungs, you're, keeping your breath held a little bit, people can tell that you're nervous and insecure. And that kind of ruins the message that you're trying to get across. And if you see that picture down on the bottom, that woman that's standing with her arms on her hands on her hips, that stance is a nonverbal message. So there's a whole video by this woman, I think her name is Ann Cuddy, and she did a TED talk about assertiveness and how the way that you stand helps you feel more assertive, keeping your voice modulated so that it's not too breathy and fast, and looking people in the eye, using an I message. I need you to, I feel uncomfortable, I need you to leave now. Those are things that carry a more forceful message than, making yourself small, using, a quiet voice or a shaky voice. I wish I could remember the movie that my daughter and I were watching, and we loved it because the woman in this movie, I can't think of the name, it frustrates me, but whenever anybody would talk to her, especially her husband, she would actually make her body smaller. You could see her kind of shrinking into herself. And, that gave him the sign that he could keep screaming and yelling at her and, using her, abusing her in certain ways. Not that she wanted it, but she just didn't know how to assert herself. Whoops.
Theresa, before you start this, since there's teachers in the room, I was wondering if they notice the from the boys to the girls. Boys, they raise their hand pretty high and far, and then girls raise their hand like from their elbow, from their waist. It's Amy Cuddy talks about that. Boys take up a lot of space. They sit down, their legs are wide, the man spread, they raise their hand, they spread their arms out, and women kind of have this smaller, take up smaller space.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting on how women kind of make themselves smaller in public interactions and relationships.
Yeah.
Any teachers out there noticed? Any teachers out there notice that the females kind of raise their hand from their elbow and the boys raise their hand all the way up high? Jamie says 100%.
Really?
Yeah, we gotta give the confidence to these girls to take up space, be important.
Yeah. They're not getting the message. I was just going to say before you asked that question, Joe, I feel like this generation that's coming up maybe doesn't have that same message that you have to make everybody happy. You can't take up too much space. You can't be, be assertive and confident. But it sounds like if Jamie's saying 100%, then it sounds like girls are still doing that.
Yeah, she even commented, this is even true in my self-contained special ed classes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's sad. Yes, we got to have those talks with those girls and boys. There's a lot of reasons why somebody might not feel confident to be themselves. And so we have to talk to everybody about that, about boundaries and the way they stand, the way they talk, the way their body presents them, their message, and that it's okay for people not to like you. It's okay to take up space. It's okay to have a voice loud enough that, people can hear you and understand you. Because at the end of the day, you got to be with yourself. Okay. I love watching this. And like I said, you might have seen it before, but you know what? It doesn't matter because Tony once told me it's okay to hear things more than once. I think it was Tony. I'm pretty sure it was. You never noticed what, Tony? What did you not notice?
I've never noticed that women only raise their hand halfway. I've always seen it being an equal thing, and more directly, students wanting to be able to give the correct answer.
Yeah.
That's funny that you're seeing different than what Jamie's seeing. I wonder if it's an age thing. Like the kids that you work with, are they older or younger than the kids that Jamie works with?
I've never seen it throughout my career. It's always been a equal or random thing.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, even 10 years old, or 10 years ago, when I went to college, I was 45 when I went to a second degree in college. And, I'm going to college with, 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds, some my age. And I noticed in the 25 to 30-year-old women, they raise their hand really kind of short from the table to the elbow. When I raise my hand, I want to be called, I raise my hand all the way from my shoulder up. So, hey, pick me. I got something to say. And I noticed in, young ladies. But that's interesting. Tony hasn't noticed that.
I myself, and whenever I'm in a group, I don't raise my hand small. I raise my hand so that I can get the attention of the teacher, speaker, facilitator, whomever. I don't know, then maybe that's just me because I'm out there like that. But I'm always, I'm always loud and proud. And
Yeah, confident.
for the most part, that's what I've always noticed. I'm not saying that what you're saying isn't true. I'm just saying that in my experience, I've not really noticed that.
And Jamie, go ahead, Theresa.
No, you go ahead.
Jamie just commented, I raise mine small to start, then we'll raise it higher to be noticed, typically looking around to see, around to others.
What's funny? I've mentioned this before to my friends and my daughter, is that when I decided that I was the lost child in my family because there was so much going on and I didn't want to be noticed. I didn't want to be seen. My brother had an addiction. I was pregnant, all that stuff was going on. And I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to be heard. And then, they didn't want me to be upset. I didn't want to upset my family members because of everything. So I kind of shoved everything down. But when I was 45, things started to change for me. I went through a big change myself, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and maritally, I got a divorce. And right around that same time, I started to learn how to say no and feel good about saying it. And I noticed that people were very uncomfortable with it because I had been up to that point a people pleaser, a yes person. And people were upset and arguments started. And then I read a book about how when you finally break through and you can, feel strong enough in your self-esteem to say no when you need to, that, people aren't going to like you and it's okay. And so I think it takes a lot of practice. And, but now I find myself saying no a lot because it feels good to me, because I know at the end of the day, if I really didn't want to do something, I'm going to feel better for saying no. So it kind of goes through changes, I think, throughout our lives. But I really wanted the women of the generation coming up to have learned this, and I thought they did, but maybe not. I'm not saying, I'm thinking about that young woman that just died by suicide, the one that was Miss USA, or I don't know what she was, but she just died by suicide. And, everybody's talking about how wonderful she was and nobody saw it in her. But I did hear her make a comment on her Twitter. Somebody read this comment that she made on Twitter that she's 30 now and she's only got so much time to do what she wants to do before she becomes invisible. That's not her exact words, but that was the sentiment, like she knows that a lot was placed on the way she looks. And, it's just sad that, she feels like, she only has a certain amount of time, and society put so much pressure on her. And it sounds like she might not have kept her boundaries, but I don't know. I'm just guessing. I don't really know her. Okay. Yeah, it's really awful. And it's really sad, that whole thing. Such a young life. That's my daughter's age. So it struck me when I heard about it. Okay. So we're going to watch this video. It's really good. It's about creating those boundaries with people that we love.
I heard that you learned in the process to be able to say, no, I'm not able to do that, which I'm going to take that line from you. No, I'm really not able to do that.
That is my no is a complete sentence, which is, I'm sorry, no, I'm not able to do that. And that's all I say. And it's really hard to say that to people. It's very interesting how, I don't know, wired we are to tell somebody 1,000 reasons why we can't do something for them. You say, I can't do it because of this and this, and as if you're required
to defend your niceness.
Yes,
your nicehood.
Yes. Right, yeah, I'm a good person.
I'm a good person.
Nice.
I want you to think I'm nice, and so I'm going to tell you why, all the reasons why. So you got that. You figured that out.
When people are giving you counsel and people are giving you advice, the vast majority of counsel that you'll get is coming from a place of love and from a place of peace.
Yeah.
But then understand at that end, you have to make that decision and be perfectly comfortable with the decision that this is in the best interest of me and where I am right now.
Yeah.
And one thing we...
Oh, sorry. Oh, what did I do? Let me fix it. Hold on. Needs a minute. Okay.
When people are giving you counsel and people are giving you advice, the vast majority of counsel that you'll get is coming from a place of love and from a place of peace.
Yeah.
But then understand at that end, you have to make that decision and be perfectly comfortable with the decision that this is in the best interest of me and where I am right now.
Yeah.
And one thing we know about all the decisions that we make is you are never going to make a decision that 100% of the people say that's a great decision.
Ain't that the truth?
Never.
Yeah.
And that's okay. The thing I then try to lean on is don't let people that don't matter too much matter too much. We're worried about what X person thinks or what Y person thinks. I'm like, why do they have so much influence over your decision making of your life?
Yeah.
Because the decision that you make is not going to impact them, nor is anything they do should it impact you. So don't let people that don't matter too much matter too much.
Don't we do that? Don't we take on other people's stuff and make it about us when we don't know that we matter? When you don't know you matter, you will make somebody else's crazy about you. You got your own stuff to handle. You don't have to take on anybody else's. But I made my grandmother's meanness and her crazy and her impatience all about me. And I didn't know that I mattered because I took on what was given to me as my own. We have a tendency to do that. And it was many, many years later, when I understood my grandmother's story. You see, we get our meaning and our mattering from our story. And if we tell a story in a way that disempowers us, we won't know that we matter even in the midst of the story.
I love her. That's Iyanla Vanzant, if you've never heard her before. And she's got great books out on all kinds of topics. And also you can find her on YouTube. She's got tons of short, long videos, whatever whatever you need help with. I just watched quite a few of them yesterday. She's great with that. Okay, so there's care information. If anybody needs it, we have resources at Care for people that live in our community. You can call them. You can go on our website that you see there. If you don't get a chance to write these down, Tony has contact with us. She could send you my email if you have questions. A lot of times people don't until the next day after they've watched something. And so feel free to contact us if you need anything or have questions.
Good deal. Thank you, guys. Joe, Theresa, great presentation as always. Thank you guys for joining. And we will see you all on Thursday, where we're going to be talking about the value of fathers. So everybody have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Tony.
Thanks,
You're
Tony.
welcome. You're welcome.